some of the questions you asked, we'll try to answer as we go through this, but keep the questions coming, because we want to make it things that are useful to you in your thinking. A lot of this is just stuff, if you think about it, is pretty obvious, but then putting it all together sometimes doesn't happen. So the next part is on the heating cooling system, and this is kind of interesting. Ductwork is a big no-no, okay? Because if you have ductwork then that goes through the wall, you have a way for hot and cold air to get into the house. So with Earth Advantage and a lot of the really tight houses, then the amount of ductwork is preferably eliminated. And then another big part, and this ties back to what Alan was saying, no propane. Because that's natural gas, that's methane, and in terms of greenhouse gases, that's 35 times worse than the CO2. So reducing that as much as we can. So what we have is considered a high efficiency heating cooling system. It's a ductless heat pump, and I'll show you some pictures of that. So this is the unit outside, and then inside we have 3 of these. We were on the Green and Solar Tour a couple years ago, and Fred Gant was doing part of the presentation and was talking about how great these are. So if you need something for heating and cooling, this is an incredibly wonderful system. And after Fred went on, it was my turn, and I said, they are just really nice, but we've never used them. Okay, because in the winter, we have the sun, and if we need it, we have the wood stove. And then this is our third source, and these work really well. They will heat it up really quickly, but we never get to the point where we need them. And in the summer, when it's hot, we can close the windows in the morning. It's cool in the house from the night. And then in the evening, we open the windows again. It flushes the hot air out. And so we ran this for like 4 hours one summer when our one daughter was with us, who was 8.5 months pregnant. You know, and she couldn't handle the temperature. But we're really wimpy. We don't like it very warm, and so we would be inclined to turn these on if it were that hot. It just isn't. And that's the tightness of the house. That's a big part of it. So if you're looking at existing structures, for comfort, I would go for insulation and drafts and getting those taken care of before you do anything else.
When I thought about, in my passive solar home, when I thought about the heating system, I used the same idea that you did in terms of cooling things off in the summer. And that works just fine. But in terms of heat, I thought I couldn't figure a system that was more energy efficient than having a baseboard heater in a particular room where you could close the door. You only need to heat the one room, not the whole house. And if you want to heat it, then it's nearly 100% efficient because there's no fans, there's no ducts, there's no nothing, it's just a heater.
So for that system, that's the most efficient, and it does have the real advantage. It's not central air that's heating the whole house. You're heating a specific area. So those are things to consider as you're looking at heating. But for us, it's nice to have these as a backup, but we don't really use them. This is about the infiltration and the ceiling and ventilation. So the blower door test, and then what we have an HRV, ERV system. I'll just mention those. So here's Fred. How many know Fred? Anybody? A few people do. He's a certifier for Earth Advantage Lead and Energy Star. Okay, so I want to explain why this is valuable. I mentioned already you have a third party. It's not the builder who's saying this is what you should be doing if you want to be efficient, and yes, you're doing this and this and this, and he checks it. A lot of people buy products that are Energy Star. And that's the same idea. That's a third party saying this meets whatever the requirements are, the quality control things. So anytime you can go to that third-party certification, it just gives you a little more confidence that what you're doing is good. How many know what a blower door test is? Okay, so what you do is, we have the molding on. I think we did it in this house. We were pretty much all finished. When we did this in Missouri, we did it earlier in the building process. But you close everything except the front door usually. And this piece goes around the front door with this fan in here. And what it's going to do is going to suck all the air out of the house. Not all of it, obviously, but it's going to suck the air out of the house. The way we used it in Missouri, the molding wasn't on. I'm not sure what you're telling me.
Louder.
The molding wasn't on, and they would go around with a little puff of like smoke that they could see. If there was a hole, like pin-size hole, it would show that that was moving. It's like you'd light a match to something, you could see it moving. And they marked all the holes and filled them in. Well, here, Steve Asher knew more about building, so we didn't have those holes. So they're testing the whole house to see if it's really airtight. And they could identify then, if the readings weren't right, the little thing that Fred was reading is here. If the readings aren't right, they could say, okay, where are we pulling in air, what's not sealed up? So it's just a measure of how to check to see if a house is really airtight. This is used, some of the companies that do energy audits of existing construction, they'll use a blower door test. It's an excellent way of finding out how tight your house is. And they can get a reading then that will be compared to other houses, and you can say, oh, I'm really leaky, or I'm pretty good, or really good. So that's the blower door test. This unit, and anybody want to correct me on this one, please do so. The house is really tight. So the concern is the quality of the air in the house, especially in the winter when you have everything closed up. So,
And the wood stove.
and the wood stove, yes. So this unit is in the attic. And what it does is it's a air exchanger, so that it takes the stale air in the house and exchanges it in the winter time. And it's set so that it returns air that's the same temperature to the house, so we don't even know what's happening. Our bathroom fans that I'll show you in a minute, those come through this unit also, which is in the attic. So the only way we know a bathroom fan is on is if we leave the note out saying, don't forget to turn the fan off. Or you can take like a tissue and put it by the fan and you can see it sucking.
It doesn't make noise, in other words.
There's no noise.
There's no noise.
Go ahead.
Do you know what the power use of that is?
No, I don't,
Watts or anything?
but I have the books.
Okay.
One thing I want to do is go to all our appliances and all our different things and see where we're using our energy, and we'll talk about our energy use in a minute, because we do use energy and what's doing it. In the summer, I turn that off because the windows are open. I feel I don't need it. Now, in Missouri, we didn't have that, and we had rooms that got musty, moldy, and so we really appreciated,
Especially the front.
especially closets. All right, lighting, appliances, and water heating. So we're going to look at Energy Star, lighting, the appliances, and the hot water heating and insulation. I spent a lot of time on lights, and we ended up with as many LEDs as we could. We have a few that aren't. But just for comparison, if you think your regular 60-watt standard light bulb, I'm going to skip halogen. If it's a CFL that you want that much light out of, you need to get a 13-watt. And if you're dealing with an LED, you only need a 10-watt. So that tells you you're requiring a lot less energy in your system to run those bulbs that get you just as much light. This is a LED payback, And so for us, the estimate is it takes about 2.5 years to get payback. Anybody gone to buy an LED?
I just bought them today.
Did you turn around and say, I'm not gonna pay that price for those
No.
things?
No, they've got 60-watt ones now, and that's relatively recent, I think.
It's a technology that's really happening quickly.
Well, yeah.
So when we look at LEDs, they're expensive, but they last 35 years. We didn't buy any extra light bulbs, we just bought what we needed. We're not gonna replace those things.
Especially if they're high up someplace you don't want to get up and have to change it, it's really great to be able to put in an LED and know it'll be there for 20 years.
And just in conversations with people having schools or big buildings, the cost they save with their LEDs is not in the bulb, not replacing it. It's in the cost of replacing bulbs in those high places and what they pay their maintenance staff. So that's where the difference comes from.
One question about that is, do they have an approximate use time? How
Yes.
much usage they're going to use every day? Come back with these payback times?
Yeah, and they standardize it for this. And when I looked at LEDs, all the LEDs are not made equal. And so I tried to look at how long they were supposed to last and then the price and comparing. Because LEDs, well, I don't know if you remember when fluorescents first came out, they were really expensive, and then all of a sudden you could go anywhere and get them, and people went and got fluorescents, and they didn't last the 7 years. Well, the quality control wasn't there for the ones that were really cheap. The same is true with LEDs. You can buy those little bulbs and make a light more cheaply, but it doesn't have it might not last as long. And that's why, I think we have it in the slide here. We bought LEDs that were Energy Star, meaning a third party had reviewed them, rather than just getting any. So in some cases, we paid more money, but we felt more confident in the quality of what we're getting. So these are the LEDs we have. This is a can light, and we used quite a few of those. The only thing we did wrong is we put in more than we needed because we didn't realize how bright they'd be. Now, we did put dimmers on them, which was really smart. You have to make sure your bulb is dimmable, and you have to get the right dimmer switch, but they can be dimmed. And so in our living room, we can have it really bright, but we can bring it down to really, really low. So we use the cans in the living room, the kitchen. Those are the main areas. These are under the counter LEDs, under the cabinet. So they're under the cabinet but above the countertop. And these are fairly low, so they're nice for very direct but not super bright lighting. Very pleased with those. This is in the attic. It's just one of those simple 60, 75 watt equivalents. That's the light. There's no shade or anything on that. That's just the way it looks. These are our pendants, and we, again, because we were kind of on the edge of these being released and people not knowing what they were doing, it took us quite a while to get the right pendant and the right dimmer switch. But those dim, and that's just over our dining room table. This is the one I'm the proudest of. These are LEDs.
Really?
Yeah. And again, the mistake I made, put too many in. But these are in the laundry area, the mechanical room, and the garage. And what happens right now is fluorescent fixtures are so cheap that you have to have somebody who knows what they're doing. You buy the LED tubes and you just put them in a fluorescent fixture, but you don't need the ballast, so you take the ballast off and you do a few other things that I wouldn't do. I've read a lot about, but I wouldn't do it. I would get somebody who knows what they're doing. Super pleased with these, the light that we get. So far, these are not designed too much for homes, so they're not as available. They were more expensive, but for what we were doing, it was worth the money to do them.
So what's the energy rating of those fluorescent LEDs?
I'd have to look it up. I do have it in my folder at home.
Do you remember how much you paid for the fluorescent type?
These,
Uh-huh.
The tubes.
$60 each,
Tubes,
the tubes,
so it's 120 for a fixture.
yeah.
But they
I-
still have the 20, 30-year,
Oh, yeah, 35.
I've been replacing low ones over the kitchen counter,
Yeah,
fluorescent, and I'm just really, I just really see I've got to go to LED, but I thought I'd have to get a whole new structure.
no, no.
That's really,
You can plug
that
those
was worth the
tubes
price
in.
of admission alone.
Exactly right, exactly
Um,
right.
I could have easily had just one tube and these would have been fine. I could have done them with $60 each, not done 120, but we didn't know. Let me see what else I wanted to say about these. Oh, we do have LED in a rope on a plant shelf, just for really low light, and those are good. We bought, again, because it was a couple years ago and this was just starting, we bought Philips LEDs because we felt that there was quality behind the name and a history of doing lights. We went for Energy Star. There are other rating systems that aren't as well known, but you could go anywhere, go for the Energy Star, and you know it's been reviewed third party. We went to Grover's because they were doing research on LEDs. And so we got to a point where we just went to Grover's Lighting and Plumbing in Medford and trusted the research they had done. I would go into Home Depot, Lowe's, and they would tell me things that I knew were not true at all. And they just didn't know, and I didn't have time for that. So that's why I made that. Okay, looking, how many think I should go faster? So,
Depends on how much you have left to do.
okay, appliances, we went for energy efficient. This is called a dish drawer instead of a dishwasher.
Is it Fisher Paykel?
It's a Fisher Paykel, and we just have one. You run it more often, but for two of us, that's fine. He doesn't dirty a lot of dishes. The oven is a convection oven, but there's really nothing special about that. The cooktop is induction. And I really debated about the money for that. Then I go to my mom's house, and she has an old electric one, and I wait for 10 minutes for the water to boil. And I come home, and if I put a cup of water on this, I better hadn't leave it, because it'll be boiling by the time I walk across the kitchen. It's so fast, well, people say it's faster than gas. If you're a gas person, it's faster than gas. So it was worth having to buy new pans, because it works on magnets, so your pan has to be magnetic. And some of mine were and some weren't, so I had to buy new pans. But the magnets make it heat.
Well, and stuff doesn't get hot if you don't have a pan on it.
Yes, as soon as you're finished, you pick up the pan. If somebody forgets to turn it off, it doesn't matter because it doesn't heat. It's
Turns
done,
itself off.
which is really good safety, especially as we get old. Refrigerator, I don't even remember the brand right now, but it's Energy Star, but just looking for that feature.
Let me make a comment on that. When I was setting up my house, I looked at a lot of different refrigerators and things, and I decided to get a refrigerator that can either be 100% refrigerator or 100% freezer. So now I use that as a refrigerator. In another room, I have 100% freezer, and that to me works out just fine.
So you're not doing the dual thing on it.
Right. And it will hold a lot more materials.
Okay. We did do the freezer on the top. supposed to be more efficient, but if you read the Energy Star things, it'll tell you about it. Washer dryer, you don't get a good sense of size, but that's a countertop. They feature the countertop. They're front load, high spin, super energy efficient. Dryer, I use about 30 minutes a month. Okay, in summer and last week, I put the clothes on the line. They're so, with a high-speed spin, they're so dry. It doesn't take long for them on the line outside or the rack inside. In the winter, I put them on the rack inside. It takes less than 24 hours and they're dry. So the only time I use the dryer is if I think I want them fluffier. I'll put them in for 10 minutes.
And the moisture's good in the house because your house is so dry.
Yes, because of the wood stove. Yeah.
Another comment, I have an attached solar greenhouse on my house, and that's where I hang my clothes to dry, and they just
Just like that.
really works fine.
So rethinking that dryer thing, that, by the way, is one of the big energy users. So if you can get away from a dryer, you're gonna save a lot of money, and you're gonna help us with the carbon, CO2 that we're emitting.
I just wanted to comment too, I had overlooked, I had corrugated hose in my dryer, which collects dust. And embarrassingly, it was pointed out to me that it had collected enough dust that it clogged up, and it's something like a #1 cause of house
A
fires.
house fire, yes,
But not to mention a huge bill, energy bill.
right.
And so now it's extremely efficient with it.
Yeah, and so keeping that clean is the hose that goes out of that. And then you've got another hole through the house. That's one of our holes that goes out that we worry about. All right, this looks, I think, a little more complicated than it is. This, we have 2 tanks, and they're a lot of different systems. So I'll just say basically what happens. We have the panels on the roof that are, in our case, they heat, it's like antifreeze that goes through the panel. It comes back into the system. This tank has the water and the hot antifreeze. It's a heat exchange. Okay, and I'm making that really simple. But within this big tank, then, is where the solar heated hot water comes in, or the antifreeze comes in, heats the water, and then it comes into this tank. Now, this tank is where we draw from. So if it's not hot enough, then it's electric backup, and it heats it to the temperature we want. So, the system we had in Missouri was a little different. They both work. We realized that the electric part of this, we don't need 5 months out of the year. We've started pulling the fuse on that for 5 months, and we have all the hot water we want because it's coming from the solar. Yeah.
Did you consider on-demand?
We did it very briefly, and I think I had some misinformation. I thought there was an issue with on-demand and solar, and I know that's not true now. And I think that's why we dismissed it. So that's another option, and especially if it's not new construction and you're wanting to look at the way you're getting your hot water, looking at the on-demand. Because you're here, and this really kills me. We have all this hot water in here all the time, and we use it 3 times a day. So we do have here a circulator, so that our master bathroom, which is quite a ways away from this, we have that set during shower time, so that, and it takes like 2 minutes. It just takes it around and heats it. And so if we turn that on, walk into the bathroom and take our shower, we've got immediate hot water there. We don't have what's in the pipes being cold. So I had, my cousin put one of these on for my mother. This, I think, is worth a lot, and they cost not much.
What's that called again?
Circulation
Circulator,
pump.
yeah, circulation
Circulator.
pump.
I don't think we've got that, but I think we have the
Well,
on-demand.
the
Ain't working.
issue with this is you have to have electricity by it, to run it. But you can set it on a timer for whenever you want.
But you also have to have return piping, don't you? So that
I
water that's in
think-
the pipe comes back again?
I don't think so.
Yes,
How does it work?
How does it do it then?
It
it
does.
works on a pump, works actually on the cold water return.
So it pushes the hot
It
water back
pushes
down the
hot
cold
water
into the cold?
and then, once it gets to temperature, it cuts off, but it uses the cold water line to bring it back.
Okay, because I knew at one point we talked about having to have two
But you don't
separate
have
sets
to-
of pipes, and my mom's is an old house, and it
Yeah,
works.
you can, on old houses, new houses, they usually do a complete, separate system, but on old houses, they just use the cold water line to do the return.
I think they use the cold water lines. I don't think they put in a separate set of pipes. This is just showing that these are insulated. And I said, well, what about a blanket on these? And they said, these are so insulated the way they are that we don't need that. So that's why they're not blanketed. Okay, indoor air quality. This, well, I won't show you, but the framing, the moisture in the lumber, that's one of the requirements for the certification. We'll look at the bath fans and the VOCs, and I'll explain that if you don't know what that is. So this is our fan in the bathroom. And if you look up in it, you can kind of see it. And this is our thing on the wall, and we just, red means it's on high, or green, or is low. So that pulls the air when we want circulation. And that goes through that unit that's in the attic. So that works like a fan, but it's quiet. It's just really nice.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Real quick question. What about exhaust fans over the stove when you want to get all that god awful greasy smell out?
We do have a
Okay.
fan over the stove.
Okay.
Okay, the paint, how many people know what low VOC is? Okay, so volatile organic compounds, this is the stuff that you don't want to smell. The paints we've had for years have this nasty stuff in it. Now they're aware of that, and so with effort, not a lot, with some effort, you can get paint that's either low or no VOC. And so that's one of the Earth Advantage check marks, is do you have that? So it looks like standard paint, but if you read the back, then it's going to be low VOC. All the big companies have that now. If you're doing any painting, you should try to get low VOC varnish. You can get it in all of those adhesives. You can get low VOC. Okay, the building materials, we tried to be within 500 miles as much as possible. We're looking at energy to get materials to us. So if you buy them locally, then that reduces that gas that's used. Cabinets, avoiding the urea formaldehyde, and then our floors are hard surfaces, and we've talked about those a little bit. Cabinets, just standard cabinets, but making sure that you don't have the things in the varnishes that
Quick
are not.
question.
Yes.
Did you have any preference as to where to get those building materials in the valley area?
I would have to check with Steve, but I could easily do that.
Okay.
What did you end up using for countertops?
We ended up with granite,
Except for utility.
except for the utility, and that's like a old Formica. The floors are concrete, just the slab. Yeah, and it took them a long time to convince me that this was okay. And what Steve said is, okay, what are you gonna do? Put tile, a hard surface, on concrete, a hard surface? Why are you spending all that money for tile? I said, okay. So he said what we do is we stain it. Well, they cut the and it's lovely. And we wax it once a year. And other than that, we sweep it. Now, we do not have a lot of carpet, area rugs, which we could have, because we have a puppy right now. And it's not a good idea because he eats everything. But what we do realize is we see the dirt when it's there, where when we had carpet, it disappeared.
Does the concrete feel cold at all any time of year? Or?
It's really amazing. In the winter, we probably wear slippers, but most people do in the winter. We never get a really cold feel. But in the winter, when we've got this lovely sun, and at night, then we get all that heat. When we get up in the morning, it just feels really good.
You don't have it radiant floor heating, though.
We did not do radiant floor heating. What was explained to us is the radiant floor and passive solar are two systems that compete. With passive solar, you want your sun coming in, heating your concrete, it releasing. If you have radiant floor that heats the floor, then that messes up that process. And so you lose. Plus, you've spent all this money on radiant floor. And I'm so glad they told us that, because we looked at that in the beginning. We don't need it, because the floor is so insulated. And the rest of the house is so tight. So this is on water efficiency. So these toilets, they're called stealth toilets. They're from Niagara Conservation. You can get them locally. It uses 0.8 of a gallon of water per flush, and they work just fine. So if you're going to replace a toilet, look at some of these low water toilets. Irrigation, we're on drip. We have a control that, and these are pretty standard now, that you water at just certain times of day. We always water early in the morning before we get out, so the